The James Gailliard Show on Choice FM.
Hey everybody, this is James Gailliard. Hope you are well. Welcome to the James Gailliard Show. It is Monday, August 26, 2024, in the year of our Lord 2024. We are, 70 days and 7 hours until Election Day. 70 days and 7 hours until Election Day. I should rephrase that. 70 days, 70 hours to the culmination of Election Day, because it's going to start September. Absentee ballots will hit and all the things, and early voting. And hopefully, let me just encourage you, first of all, check your voter registration. Check your voter registration. Just Google NC voter lookup. Just Google NC voter lookup. And then you just put your name in and your county. If you have a strange name like James Gailliard, you just put your name in. But if you have a name like, a common name like Sam Johnson, you might have to put your county in or your year of birth. But that'll pop up. It'll show if your voter registration is valid and if it is current, because, stranger things have happened. So, check that. And then not only do I want you to check that your voter registration is valid, I want you to go ahead and think about what is your voter plan. What is your voter plan? And I'm going to announce mine at next week's show. And so welcome. Share this. Welcome to James Gailliard Show. Shout out to Choice FM 92.1 FM that lets me sit here every Monday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. on the People Station, where we're talking politics, culture, news, sports, religion, talking a whole lot of politics just because of the culture we're in. Shout out to everyone that calls me pastor, that I get to pastor the wonderful group of people. I was on vacation last week, so thanks for enduring those snippets that my wonderful staff put together of previous interviews. And one was a little awkward because I was moving my middle baby, Jasmine, back onto campus at UNC Chapel Hill for her senior year. Shout out to all of the teachers and students, parents, everybody that is experiencing back to school phenom. So shout out to everyone from the Virginia line all the way up to Durham. So to all of my school students in Durham and Raleigh and Zebulon and Knightdale and Wendell and Johnson County, Smithfield, Rocky Mount, Tarboro, Wilson, Roanoke Rapids, Elm City, Princeville, Scotland Neck, all the people. Shout out. I'm praying and believing God for a wonderful school year. So if you want me talking about something, go ahead and type it in. I'll take a look at it in our back segments. On the front segment today, I want to talk, first of all, about the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. Of course, their annual or their conference, the Democratic National Committee's convention. The Democratic National Convention was last week. I was on vacation, but even on vacation, I was watching it. I caught most of it in the evening and was pleasantly surprised by what I experienced. I mean, you'd have to be a hater at a minimum to not admit there was at least good entertainment, right? But I think there was some outstanding speeches, good entertainment, as I said, just awesome to see the energy, the unity. I want to shout out Democrats because I'm critical of anyone that's in the public eye, because I'm in the public eye, and I think when you're in public eye and you're a public personality, that you have to live your life out in front of everybody, right? So, and you got to be willing to take what people have to say. And so one of my criticisms for a long time has been just how bad we are in messaging. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do a whole show on messaging because, and listen, if you have been getting mailers delivered to your home, political mailers, if you would black out your address and just drop it off at the church, I'm going to do an entire show just going through political mailers and talking about the various groups that are putting money in, talking about what they're messaging and to whom they're messaging it to, and what I think is the effectiveness of that messaging. So I've got a stack in my office right now, probably 8 or 10 of them, and I'm looking to just keep accumulating them. So if you have some, you want to drop them off to me, please go ahead and do that. So today I want to talk about the Democratic National Convention that was in Chicago last week. I want to begin with some of my highlighted moments, some of the things that I enjoyed. I'd be wondering to know from you. Here's the first, and I'm telling you, I promise you, I'm going to have fancy technology one day. I'm going to be able to push some buttons and make some things happen. Working on it. I'm working on it. Just got a whole bunch of other stuff happening. But here is the unofficial survey question of the day. The unofficial survey question of the day is, if you watched the Democratic National Convention, who was your favorite speaker? Who was your favorite speaker? If you watched the Democratic National Convention, who was your favorite speaker? And I'll even give you a bonus. Or what was your favorite part of it? So it could be an entertainer or whatever the case is. And so let me shout out a couple of my moments, and then I'll tell you when we come up on the break who my favorite was. And so let's start with the vice president herself, the last night, right? I'm probably doing this in reverse order, but that's okay. I heard comment about former President Donald Trump being an unserious man. I thought was just a great speech. I mean, can I tell y'all some things that people don't know about me? So I am a former speechwriter in a previous life. And so there are a couple of somewhat famous lines that have come up over the years that have been spoken at the Democratic National Convention that I had the honor of being able to write some of those words. And so I'm always kind of interested in, I'm always finding myself I wonder who's writing the speeches these days. And so I really want to shout out the speech writers. This has probably been for me, I think, from a subset, from a group of speeches, I think some of the best that I've heard. Really well written, funny, relevant. They were in the voice of the speaker. Just really, they were delivered well. The energy was awesome. So great stuff. I think Kamala Harris's comment about former President Trump being an unserious man, that was key for me. I love that comment, but about this election being very serious. I think I texted Jada, Jasmine, and JC, and when Kamala was giving the speech, or about to give the speech, and I was like, hey, y'all tune into this. This is a big deal. This is history. I wanted them to be able to embrace that moment. And I think she did a really good job. And she had a difficult decision to make. Do I talk a bunch of policy positions because people are saying so much about her lack of policy positions? And I've got varying opinions about that. I'm not uncomfortable with her, I think, not making policy statements yet. I was in Raleigh in person with her when she introduced the economy, an opportunity economy. I think she coined it an opportunity economy. Loved it. And I really think that is principally what we're dealing with here, is that we have a subset of people that the system has worked well for. And when the system works well for you, you tend to be a critic of anyone that surfaces to change that system. So when you have never, don't be offended, y'all. Don't look at me like that. Y'all are looking at me like that. Don't be offended, because it's just me being honest and James Gailliard and transparent, okay? That's how my Irish mama raised me. So, but, being away on vacation, spending a little time at the beach, spending a little time on the water, I was amazed by people that sunbathe to the degree that they do. I just was amazed by, I'm just not laying out in the sun. The sun can get me while I'm walking. I may sit in a place for a few moments, but to lay out there for hours on end is just not my deal. And and as much as there were people that were of color laying out, the highest concentration of people laying out were people that were not people of color. And I literally made the statement, and I don't mean this but I'm trying to prove a point here. I had to make the statement that sometimes people want the beauty of a color, but they don't want the burden of a color. And I think that there are groups of people that, like, I think to not, at least, I'm not going to go so far as to say to make this presidential race about race. I'm not saying that. I am saying to ignore the race factor is disingenuous. To ignore the race factor is dishonest, particularly given the fact that former President Trump really levied and leveraged the conversation of race to his benefit and to the detriment of our nation. And so I do think that when people are pushing back against Kamala Harris about economic policies or against anything that she may believe in, I think it's because largely they have never been burdened by policies. They have never been ones that have really been hurt because their skin color didn't work against them. And so I think that oftentimes the criticism against her is one-sided, because the truth of the matter is, what for real, other than hatred, division, conflict, illegal behavior, misogyny, sexism, other than that, what do you know of that Donald Trump really supports and believes in? Totally disregard and disrespect to our troops. So really, when people say, well, where's her policy position? Where's her policy position? Where's his? Right? And so, I'm amazed by, I listened to a comment from former President Trump, excuse me, a couple days ago. I was listening to, I think, POTUS or NPR, somebody's segment, and he makes a statement about the importance of having a free exchange of information in our nation, that the hallmark of our democracy is the free exchange of information. Matter of fact, it was RFK on behalf of Trump that was making the statement. And, and I thought to myself, for them to promote free exchange of information when we waited years to get tax returns. I mean, he wasn't trying to share information. We have already seen Tim Walz's tax returns. Nobody's questioning Kamala Harris's, right? So it's interesting that people, they raise up conversations, but if you really are to sit back and think about it, they wind up being contradictory, and there winds up being a hypocrisy about the very things that they're claiming. And so Kamala Harris's statement for me at the DNC, I have it right here. In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man, but the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious. Amen to that, she said, trying to drive home the stakes of his potential return to office. And then this was said. Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails and how he would use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States not to improve your life, not to strengthen our national security, but to serve the only client he has ever had, which is himself. Man, just excellent writing and true to the bone. And listen, if you're just tuning in, this is James Gailliard. You're watching, listening to the James Gailliard Show live on Mondays from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Choice 92.1 FM, the People Station. I have 3 topics today. I've opened up talking about the Democratic National Convention. Then I want to talk a little bit about the economy. And then I want to comment on the asinine statements that have been made by people about Democrats having control of the White House for the last 12 of 16 years. And I want to tell you why it's an asinine comment, but you're going to have to wait till the end of the show to hear that comment, okay? Let's go on to President Biden. Listen, I served, I don't know. I mean, I think the only difference between serving as a pastor and serving in the General Assembly in the State House is that they didn't elect me, right? I didn't get elected here, and so thank God for that. But the pressure, the demand of public life is similar. Having said that, I've been in public life now 24 years. 4 of them, of those 24, part of those 24, but 4 of them I served concurrently in the State House and also pastor. And I can't imagine Joe Biden having spent over 50 years of his life. I mean, he was in his 20s, I believe, when he was elected to the U.S. Senate from Delaware. Y'all, listen to me if you don't know, let me tell you. The sacrifice that your family have to make, the sacrifices you have to make as individuals in terms of your family, where you go, when you go. I mean, for many, many years, this was one of the first Sundays I've been out of my pulpit for personal reasons. Every once in a while I'm out of my pulpit because I'm going to preach somewhere else. maybe in 19 years here in North Carolina, maybe I've been out of my pulpit once. I'm going to say 2 or 3 times, maybe because of sickness. I mean, I remember a time where I preached with pneumonia because I just wouldn't be out of my pulpit. And so I'm raising the point of just how demanding public life is. I mean, you've seen the pictures of Barack Obama's hair color when he went into the White House and when he came out. And when you start talking about a person like Joe Biden having served for 50 years, y'all, that in and of itself is laudable and should be celebrated. Now, having said that, I am still a believer in term limits. I still absolutely embrace the fact that there should be term limits. I don't think you should be able to spend 50 years in office, but nonetheless, he has. And he makes the statement in his speech. And let me just say, Joe Biden was strong. Got a similar statement about Roy Cooper, but I'll get to that at the end. Joe Biden was strong, and he says, I've made a lot of mistakes in my career, but I gave my best to you for 50 years. And like many of you, I've given my heart and soul to our nation. And man, kudos, shout out. If you can put clap hands in, do that. The man served faithfully in our nation for a long time. And I think we have to learn to be more celebratory and more appreciative of people who give up their lives to serve in a public way. And so shout out to him. So third person I want to talk about is Michelle Obama. And all right, I told y'all, at the end, I'm going to tell you, but Michelle Obama was my favorite. I know I told you when I got done giving you my quick little list, I was going to tell you at the end, but Michelle Obama was by far my favorite speech. I love the content of it. I loved her delivery. I loved her statement about if we bankrupt a business or choke in a crisis, we don't get a second, third, or fourth chance. If things don't go our way, we don't have the luxury of whining or cheating others to get further ahead. No. I mean, she's so right. Like, I'm in the midst now of starting a small business, and I can tell you the pressure of it is enormous, and I don't have the benefit of generational wealth as a part of my affirmative action plan. I want to say that again, because the people that are in opposition of affirmative action, in opposition of diversity, equity, inclusion, they have directly benefited from affirmative action for years. If your mama went to Columbia, your daddy went to Columbia, and you wound up going to Columbia, it's a really good chance you didn't just go to Columbia because you were some great student. You went to Columbia because you had history there. Your parents were graduates of there. You were a legacy. In many situations, they're giving to the building campaign, and you are a beneficiary of affirmative action. Right? You're a beneficiary of, that's why I didn't agree with the Supreme Court state ruling about the whole affirmative action piece, and we'll have to talk about that at another show. But she was basically saying, you have a guy who choked in a crisis, needed a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance, bankrupted several businesses, but whined about every little thing, but he benefited from the generational wealth of his family, and he was able to continue moving forward, and yet trying to create an environment where other people don't get to move forward. But what really gave her the shout out was her statement about, I want to know who's going to tell him. And then she says, who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those, quote, black jobs? I have to believe that if there is a moment of regret in the life of anything that's come out of the mouth of Donald Trump, it has got to be the comment about black jobs. It's just who would say that? And why would you say that? Well, I guess I know why. So that's my piece on her. Barack Obama, his comment about the crowd size was hilarious. The way he used his body language, and you got to miss the Obamas, y'all. You have to miss them. Love them. He says childish nicknames and crazy conspiracy theories, this weird obsession with crowd sizes. That's like pastors who have like a weird obsession with church sizes. Oh my God, I had 800 people in service. Oh my God, I had this many people in service. And like, it's okay, bro, And so everything doesn't have to be compared based on size. He went on to say, the other day I heard someone compare Trump to the neighbor who keeps running the leaf blower outside your window every minute of every day. And he says, from a neighbor, that's exhausting, but from a president, it's just dangerous. Tim Walz's son, I'm almost done. Let me know what, matter of fact, I'm up on break, but Tim Walz's son, I want to talk a little bit about, he shared his emotional display. I mean, this shout out about, hey, that's my dad. How awesome is that? And I think that having a young man with anxiety disorder, a nonverbal learning disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, for Republicans or any group of people to come for that 17-year-old boy is just off limits. Children need to be off limits. I am sorry, unacceptable, and I have no respect for people that chime in on that stuff, heart it, like it, comment on it, share it. You wouldn't want your 17-year-old child put out on blast. I signed up for public office. I signed up to be a pastor. That's what I feel like God has called me to do. But if you come for my children, you're not coming for the children of the legislator or the children of the pastor. You coming for James's children. And that means I'm coming for you. So I have no respect for these people that went after this young man, after Tim Walz's son. It was just totally unacceptable. Gus, shouting you out, man. Love you, love you, love you. And then real quick, y'all, Dana Nessels, her comment, she's Attorney General from Michigan. And she put a spin on an old Charleston Heston line, and she said, I got a message for the Republicans and the justices of the United States Supreme Court. You can pry this wedding band from my cold, dead, gay hand. And she says, I'm retaining a lot of water, so good luck with that, she added. I thought that was funny. I really appreciated everyone's passion. I want to shout out Governor Roy Cooper, who was platformed to speak. If you notice, so you kind of clout the governor has, he was the last actual person to speak before Kamala Harris hit the stage. There was a video after him, and then it was her. So shout out, Roy got some clout. And shout out to Durham Mayor Leonardo Williams. I was just with Leonardo Williams in Raleigh when Kamala was in town. He talked about small business, entrepreneurship. He and his wife own Welly Kitchen. It's the only African restaurant of its type. Zimbabwean, I believe it is. It's the only Zimbabwean restaurant of its type in America. They now have 3 locations, Durham-based. He's the mayor of Durham. Get small business, entrepreneurship, all the things. Hey, y'all, this is James Gailliard. You're watching, listening to James Gailliard Show. I'm going to check out your comments. I'll be right back. We've got to pay some bills.
The James Gailliard Show on Choice FM.
Hey, this is James Gailliard, and welcome back to the James Gailliard Show. I was all over the place here in the studio because we've got a lot of moving parts, and we might actually have a special guest. And so, hey, welcome back. Thank you for being with me live on Choice 92.1 FM. We've been talking today about, first of all, the Democratic National Convention, but I want to shift a little bit and talk about the economy because I'm just going to say frustrated with some of the language about the economy and the blame that it's being placed on. And I want to talk a little bit about the things that are causing inflation, things that are kind of causing. Look, and I don't minimize this, right? We are at a 40-year record with a huge, like 9+% year-over-year inflation increase. We're starting to see spiking gas prices, rent prices going up, home prices going up, food costs going up, inflation going up. I mean, all of the things. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the reasons why, because this is the language that I don't like. I don't like the language that puts the blame of what's going on in terms of the rising costs of things strictly at the hands of President Biden and Vice President Harris. I think that those people that do that, I'm going to say a couple things, and I don't know which category you want to use. They either are just misinformed, and I'm going to say something very strong about that. I think they're just not properly educated about economic issues, or they're misinformed about economic issues. Or they're being deliberately manipulative with the hope of getting a candidate across the finish line. But I want to tell you what I really think it is, and this is going to be strong comment. What it really is for me are that people that don't want to own up to the fact that they don't want to see a woman or a person of color in the White House. And so they're making it about economic issues that, quite frankly, are not hers. They're not placed at her feet in terms of blame. And so what I want to do is I want to give you information. I want us thinking about the economic issues from a different lens. I want us to think about this holistically, okay? So I'm going to start throwing out some subject matters. And listen, if you're just getting on the show today, this is James Gailliard. You're listening to the James Gailliard Show live every, Monday from 5 to 6 on Choice 92.1 FM. The question for the day is, who did you enjoy most? A survey question. Who did you enjoy most at the Democratic National Convention? And mine was Michelle Obama. I really enjoyed her. But I loved all the speech writing. Really appreciated the comments from the soon-to-be president and our current vice president. Now we're shifting gears and want to talk about the economy a little bit. And listen, I'm the shopper in my family. When I say I'm the shopper in my family, I don't mean that from a perspective of Amazon and all those things, even though I probably do a little bit of that as well. But I mean, I'm talking about grocery shopping. And, I started seeing this probably, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 months ago. I'm a little bit bougie when it comes to certain types of products. Like I like spicy brown mustard, but it's got to be like Grey Poupon. Like I don't like the store brand, that kind of stuff, right? So, same thing with ketchup. I don't want, the Great Value brand. I got a little bit of, snootiness in me about that. Other places I'll save money, but it's usually not that. But just about 6-8 months ago, I was like, man, stuff is really getting expensive. And I started finding myself, looking at more of the less brand names, more the generic brand, store-bought names, etc. So this segment is not to suggest to us that there is not a real concern about what is going on in terms of inflation. But I do want to share a few things about drivers of inflation. And because I don't think that we recognize some of the things that really impact our economy, listen, if you're listening to me, you're in Raleigh, you're in Durham, you're in where else is my listening audience? Rocky Mount, Tarboro, Wilson. Our economy is broader than Eastern North Carolina. It's broader than a few counties. It's broader than the 100 counties of North Carolina. It's broader than the Southeast. We literally are a part of an international economy, whether we recognize it or not. And so even amongst the G7, I mean, when you even begin looking at those countries that make up the Group 7, the countries that make up the G7, 3 of those countries do have a lower inflation, at least in 2023, right? That was Italy, Japan, and Canada. But 3 of them had a higher inflation rate than the United States, which was Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. And so a lot of times we don't recognize that this is a part of a broader conversation. How many of you know that there is a war going on with Russia and Ukraine? How many of you know that Russia invaded Ukraine? Right? Every hand is going up. Now, this is the point of this. The point of this is that we live in a culture of spin masters. We live in a culture of people that will place the blame on an issue, assuming that you and I will not do our due diligence to further research that issue. And the purpose of this show, amongst other purposes, is to get us critically thinking through issues, recognizing that we cannot entertain ourselves to a better quality of life. We're going to have to educate ourselves there. And when people come to you and say, the reason I'm not voting for Kamala Harris is because of gas prices and egg prices and et cetera, and she does not have an economic policy. She does have an economic policy. I haven't heard any of Trump's economic policy other than cut taxes for rich people. I haven't heard, but what I have heard from Vice President Kamala Harris is I have an opportunity economy perspective. And when you begin looking at why some of these things are what they are, we don't recognize some of the drivers. So let me ask you a question. I already asked you the first one. We know there's a war going on, Russia and Ukraine, right? Now, how many of you think through Russia and Ukraine as part of the reason that we have some of the issues that we have? How many of you think about the Russia invading Ukraine as a driver of inflation? Now, so get what the spin masters say, get what the Fox News outlets say, get what these various far-right evangelical extremist environments are saying. They're saying, hey, listen, I don't want to vote Democrat because there's the prices of this, the regular ordinary person can't afford a house and they barely have enough money to get to the end of the month, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's all the part of that's all the fault of Democrats. Not true. Not true. First of all, there are drivers to inflation. And when you begin, if you check with any economist, when you talk about the drivers to inflation, I'm going to tell you who's not on the list. I'm going to tell you who's not on the list. When you go to University of Penn, Wharton School of Business, they're going to talk about direct impacts of higher commodity prices. They're going to talk about indirect impacts of higher commodity prices. They're going to talk about COVID. If you're just tuning in, it's James Gailliard Show. I'm talking about inflation and all of the propaganda and misinformation that's going out there. You check with all of the major schools, the Fuquay School of Business at Duke. You know, you check with Keenan Flagler School of Business at UNC. You check with those schools. Why do we have inflation? They're going to say, let me tell you about drivers. They're going to talk about a stressed supply chain. They're going to talk about affordable housing. I'm going to say something about that in a minute. But let me tell you what is not going to be included by any economist as a driver to inflation. There is not a single economist on the earth that is going to say the president of the United States is a driver for inflation. That human being does not exist. So all of this dialogue, all of this bravado, all of this misinformation is just simply not accurate. When people say, I don't want to vote Democrat in this next election, I don't want to vote for Kamala Harris because of the price of eggs and cheese and this and that, this is what they're saying. What they're saying is we don't want people who have never had an opportunity to get an opportunity. And what they're saying is we don't want to see a person of color actually having the highest office in the land and being the leader of the free world. But it is not about the economy. It's not about that. And so I want to prove it to you today. I don't have a lot of time to do this because I may have a guest coming into the studio. They're going to let me know in a minute if they do, and I'll take a break a little bit early. So I'm just queuing the folk back at the station. So let's talk for a moment about Russia invading Ukraine. And don't even get me started on this for real, because I wish I had time to deal with it. What was it, 2008? I mean, Russia been invading places. 2008, a Republican is in the White House. There is an invasion in that part of the country against Georgia, a place called Georgia, not Georgia in the United States, overseas. There was no response. There was no response from the Republican Party around this invasion. They created literally an apathy toward this. I believe had George Bush handled the invasion in 2008 differently, we may not be in this position right now. So let's talk about Russia invading Ukraine. We don't understand that we are part of a global economy. And when that happens, there are impacts to higher energy. There are impacts to the input of prices in the global marketplace. And so what I pay for an egg today is not just driven by what an egg costs in the United States. It's driven by what it takes to create an egg in the United States. Statement, put a pin in there. I wish I had time. If it was Sunday morning, I had time to walk through all this. So the Ukrainian war is impacting global markets. Those global markets impact things like oil and gas. It impacts things like agricultural grain. It impacts things like metals. And all of these things have skyrocketed. Why? Because there is a reduced Ukrainian output. Ukraine is one of the biggest exporters of grains. And now there is a sanction against oil and gas in Russia. So when you start looking at energy and food prices, they get high, they remain high, and they're going to have potential further increases. But the driver of the inflation prices is not Joseph Biden. But one of the drivers is Russia invading Ukraine. So let's talk about this. See, this war, so, when I look at it from a layman, because I'm not in Congress, Never been in Congress. I don't know all the stuff they talking about behind all those committees and stuff in Congress. But if I'm looking at it from just a logical thinking person, and people are like, good Lord, why are we spending so much money in Ukraine trying to help them defend themselves, trying to help them combat this war? A part of this is because the war is costing us so much money on the global marketplace. I mean, granted, we care about Ukrainians. I mean, that's a given. But this is a business conversation, economics discussion. So let's put it together, because this is what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, gee, the U.S. does very little direct trade with Ukraine. They do very little direct trade with Russia. But listen to me. There are certain U.S. businesses. There are certain businesses and industries that face an exposure to the war. Industries like energy, industries like food, like semiconductors. So even though the United States does not, even though I got my ringer on my phone, I don't know why I always do that in the studio. So even though the United States does not entirely rely on imports for their products, our prices are determined in a global marketplace. Let's talk about oil prices, gas prices. When you have, with the onset of fracking, created a surge in the U.S. energy production over the last several decades, right? Which made the U.S. a little less reliant on energy imports. With total imports of oil and gas going down by 63% from a peak that was during the Bush administration in 2008. But listen to me, in the short term, when we get cut off from Russia, which is the world's third largest energy exporter, and we get cut off from those 4.3 million barrels of crude oil that get exported every day, it has then an increase in gasoline prices and also plastic prices. Are you seeing how this stuff connects? So the supply and price of global food commodities have also been directly impacted by the war. This is James Gailliard. You listen to the James Gailliard Show. I'm putting holes in the argument that I'm not voting Democrat. People say I'm not voting Democrat because of what's going on with the economy and inflation. And when's the last time that person said to you, one of the drivers of the inflation is the Ukrainian-Russian war? They probably have not said that to you. Russia and Ukraine, listen to me. Russia and Ukraine account for 29% of global wheat exports. They account for 17% of global corn exports. Now, higher wheat prices then impact grocery store prices. If they account for 29% of the exports and they're in war, so now you've got a reliance that was on a food product of wheat that now has to get higher price. What happens with the wheat? Let me tell you what happens with the wheat. We feed animals with it. So then what happens? If I feed animals with wheat and the wheat costs me more, then it drives the cost of animal protein. So now my chicken costs more. Well, what do chickens do? They give me eggs. So now my dairy, my eggs are higher price. So my egg prices are not higher because Joe Biden in office. My egg prices are higher because 39% or 29% of the darn wheat export and corn export is being impacted by a global war. Come on, people. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. This is James Gailliard. You are listening, watching the James Gailliard Show. And I'm trying to help us think more critically, just watch them, listen to my notes so I know we're on the same page. We are critically raising issues and we just don't understand what they mean. You know, and I would argue, y'all, when you start looking at all of the impact of this, then you'll start to see that when people are raising this propaganda and this stuff that they're raising, it's not ingenuous. It's not honest. It is not with full understanding of everything that's going on. So let's keep talking about inflation. And I mentioned to you, as far as if you want to blame a presidency, then go back to 2008 and blame George Bush. Because when you start to look at the aftermath of the 2008 invasion of Georgia, the Bush administration, even though they airlifted Georgian soldiers serving in Iraq back to Georgia to fight, and they provided a humanitarian aid package, and they offered worded denouncement and demarches, it categorically rejected providing Georgia with serious military assistance. No anti-tank missiles, no air defense missiles. They even refrained from implementing and punishing economic sanctions against Russia. So if you want to start talking about, I don't like the status of the economy, well, then start thinking about the Russian-Ukraine war as one of the drivers, and then start thinking about the fact that in 2008, the Republican Party and George Bush created basically a leave, take hands off of Russia foreign policy approach. I'm just saying, getting you something different to think about. It's James Gailliard. You are watching, listening to James Gailliard's show. Let's talk about another reason for the struggling economy. Businesses having a hard time finding workers, especially if you are talking about key supply chain industries like trucking. Listen, before COVID, it was a hard time finding a trucker. But now, man, the labor shortages are major. And again, they go back to the pandemic, but they only got exacerbated in the pandemic. So when you start looking at job openings for workers in the transportation area, I'm talking about the logistics area. Hey, look, throw this in free for young people. If you're looking for some job security, a great job, a great way to provide for your future and your family, look at going into logistics. You know, people that understand warehouse logistics, people that own transportation companies or long distance drivers or even local drivers, great job opportunities. And so when you get a disruption of the global trade network and you start having a hard time filling jobs, then if I make a widget, right, and I make the widget overseas and the United States imports that widget, but in order for that, that widget to get from overseas to the United States, I've got to put them on, I got a truck, I've got to put them on a boat, big containers. You've seen those big metal containers, right? I got 100 of those containers full of widgets, and I put them on a barge ship, and that barge ship travels across the oceans. It hits a port in the United States. Crane pulls up. That means, now watch this, I need a person to run the crane. If I got everybody I need, I can get all 100 containers of widgets off in 2 days. But I don't have everybody I need, so those 100 containers of widgets take now 3 months to come off. They finally come off the barge ship, and now I need to pick them up again from crane and put them on a tractor trailer, 18-wheeler. But I need somebody to drive it. The longer it takes for me to get all of that product in, the longer it takes, the higher the price of that product. Because there's a big demand waiting on it, but the supply is not catching up. And so because there's a big demand for it, what do I get to do as the manufacturer? I keep raising those prices on it, right? So when people make these comments about the inflation issue being the fault of Joe Biden, that's why they're not going to vote Democrat, it's just people that are, they're just not thinking. And so, look, this is James Gailliard. I'm going to take an early break today. You're watching, listening to James Gailliard's show. I'm going to try to listen to all your comments. We're going to take a commercial break, and we'll be right back for our last segment.
The James Gailliard Show on Choice FM.
It goes so fast. I apologize. I have not seen a single message from any of you yet, and I normally do a really good job of trying to kind of see what people are saying and what's going on. And so I'm going to jump on now and do a little bit of that, and just kind of see what's happening. So I'm talking about inflation. Today, we had three main segments we wanted to talk about. First, we talked about the Democratic National Convention, and we talked about, just who our favorites were. And I'm going to see what your comments were in terms of your favorite speakers. Mine was Michelle Obama, and I thought the speech writing was excellent, so we talked a little bit about that. And now I've gotten into this whole conversation. I really want to see your comments about this, about inflation, and about some of the perspectives of why. And listen, let me be very clear. I'm not saying we don't need to address it. I am saying there are some elements of it that are out of our control. And the quicker we can end the Ukrainian-Russian war, one of the ways we'll be better off. I think the other way we're going to be better off is just investing more in public education and more in community colleges. Why do you say that, Pastor? I say that because I just talked to you about one of the drivers of inflation is our inability to attract certain workers. When you have an issue with the workforce, and I've talked about that. When you have an issue with the workforce, it drives up price. And so when businesses are struggling to find workers, so workforce is key. And so support those community colleges. We need people that, listen, we could build more houses if we had more plumbers, if we had more brick masons, if we had more general contractors, right? We just don't have the supply. And because we don't have the supply, it impacts our ability to produce. And whenever your ability to produce is minimized, whatever is produced is more expensive. You think about it. If I'm a builder and I've got 1,000 homes for sale and nobody wants to buy them, guess what? Prices of those homes go down. But if I'm a builder and I only can build 10 homes and I got 1,000 people wanting those 10 homes, and guess what? I'm going to keep jacking up those prices. So part of this issue is, and this is why I think I blame Republicans more than I blame Democrats, because Republicans, if you look at Project 2025, they are anti-public education, point blank. They want to get rid of the entire Department of Education. Well, you go ahead and kill public education, and you kill any ability to be able to flood the workforce, the workplace. Let me go ahead, just with the people that I have watching and listening right now. How many of y'all went to public school? Just raise your hand. I bet you it's 90% of us. So the overwhelming majority of everybody in the workplace went to public school. And by dismantling public education, I'm dismantling a future workforce. But yet one of the drivers of inflation is the poor workforce. So what I want us to do is to begin thinking through elements of what people are saying. Think through those things so that we can address them in a thoughtful, critical way. And so the job filling rate is a standard measurement of how quickly companies can fill positions. And it has been on a downward path for over a decade. When it talks about transportation, it talks about warehousing. So this issue that we've struggled with around public education and around being able to onboard people onto certain positions, this is not a Joe Biden conversation. This happened many, many, many years ago, right? And so the tight labor market has also pushed the wage increase to a new historical level. And so, again, I want us thinking through supply chain. Let's talk about affordable housing real quick, because I'm coming up short on the end of the show. Hope this show has been helpful for you today. I've enjoyed doing it. Let's talk about housing. How many of you know our housing prices are just crazy, right? Let me give you one of the reasons why. So a lot of times we have Republicans who will say, I want a small government. I want as little regulation as possible. I want people out of my business. So let me say something. If you want me out of your business, you don't get to complain about half the stuff you complain about. There's a United States, there's a Food and Drug Administration, right? So you and I get some milk. Let me just use this example. You go to the grocery store and you get milk. But I'm pay attention to everything I'm saying. You go to the grocery store, you get milk. But the milk you get does not have a date on it. It does not have a sell by date. It does not have a use by date. It's just somebody came along, they're manufacturing milk, and they sell it. You get the milk home, and it's sour. Every time you get milk home, it's sour. What do you start to do? You start complaining, like, look, I'm tired of buying sour milk. So then you go to your legislator, you're like, you know what? I'm tired of buying sour milk. Can't we do anything to make sure the people who are selling me my milk can make sure my milk's not sour? And you're like, okay, you know what? We can create an agency that can monitor that for you. Because if you're having that problem, other people are having that problem, and we don't want Americans sick from sour milk. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create Food and Drug Administration. We're going to create a Department of Agriculture. And we're going to create a Department of Agriculture. And what they're going to do is they're going to come up with a system. And they're going to say to people, hey, listen, if you want to produce milk and you want to sell it to the public, you got to put a date on it to let people know when it's going to be bad. And you can't sell people bad milk. So now I have a government agency protecting a problem, right? Are y'all still following me? If you're following me, say I'm following you, Pastor. Now, I can't come along then and say, I don't want the agency. I want small government. If you say, I want small government and I don't want the agency, you don't get to complain about a single thing that goes on in our nation. So the reality of it is our agencies exist to protect us, to make sure that we don't have to buy sour milk, right? And so the point that I'm making is that people will complain, the very people, you listen to it, the very people that are complaining about inflation, complaining about the economy, are the very people that want to get rid of the regulation that helps stabilize it. It's the craziest argument. So let me give you one more about affordable housing. Let me teach you a word, expression if you don't know it. Private equity firms. Private equity firms. This is what a private equity firm does. A private equity firm, they swoop into a market with a tremendous amount of capital, a tremendous amount of money. And what they do is they buy up homes in bulk. And what they do is they transform those homes into high-priced rentals. So what happens then is that will reduce the number of homes that are available for regular families to purchase. So when we start, part of the reason we see this happening all over the country. So what they'll do is they'll go buy up 40 houses in one community. They'll aggressively renovate those homes, but they won't make them available on the market for purchase. They're going to flip, or if they do, they'll flip them for a huge margin. But what they really do is they go and rent them, but they rent them at a really exorbitant high cost. So, and the higher the interest rates get, the more the private equity firms benefit, because if you are a cash buyer, you are not negatively impacted by the interest rates. So we've got to recognize, like, one of the reasons we have a real struggle in the housing crisis is because of private equity firms. And all Republicans are going to do is minimize whatever regulation they can so that those private equity firms can keep doing whatever they're doing. So when they say you can't even afford buying a home, one of the reasons I can't afford buying a home is because of private equity firms that Republicans support and that largely fund their campaigns. So think about this stuff, folks. Part of the inflation is because of the war going on and the impact upon corn and wheat and gas and plastic. Part of the reason of inflation is because of our inability to provide the labor needed. And we don't have people in warehousing and driving trucks and in logistics. But when you talk with every major economist, this is for those of you just tuning in, they're not going to list the presidency of the United States as a factor for inflation. So that argument is just not good. All right, y'all. Last thing I'm going to say. I saw this was the craziest darn social media post. This is what it said. The Democrats have had the White House 12 of the last 16 years. And saying the Kamala's been there for 3.5. Nothing is getting better. Even the whole party is sick of it. The whole party, I'm a Democrat. I'm not sick of it. So what people will do when they're being manipulative and dishonest and don't want to be honest about their racism, their sexism, is that they'll use absolutes a lot. You know, my master's degree is in counseling, and so I've learned a lot about people who use absolutes, and generally speaking, they're usually hiding behind something, because when somebody says he's always wrong, he's always lying, nobody's always doing anything. So whenever you see absolutes, let that be a warning sign. So it says, the whole party is sick of it. The whole party? Really? Everybody? People can see it in their pockets, the borders. Child grooming. How my child is raised is my responsibility. It's not the government's responsibility. The morals of the country, the morals of my family is my responsibility. Foreign wars. I already proved to you that probably the issue of Ukraine and Russia is probably more on the heads of Republicans than Democrats. Then he says you can't lie about a man who can't afford a house. I just told you one of the reasons why people can't afford homes. So this is why this comment is so disruptive and so dishonest and so disingenuous. I did the math. This is a data-driven show. It is true that 12 of the last 16 years, a Democrat has been in the White House. But what is also true, in those same 16 years, there have been more Republicans elected than Democrats collectively in the Congress. And as you know, a president can't do anything without a Congress that supports him or her. So for the person who writes and says 12 of the last 16 years, things have been controlled in the White House by a Democrat, what they fail to also say is those same 12 to 16 years, there have been more Republicans elected in the U.S. Senate and the Congress than Democrats. I want to remind you, sir, that it is not the president that creates the public policy. They are in the executive branch of the White House. That policy creation is done by the Senate and the Congress. And even though you are right that for the last 12 of 16 years, a Democrat has been in the White House, you neglected to tell your church and your community that for those same 12 of 16 years, there have been more elected Republicans in Congress than Democrats. And they are the ones tasked with public policy that will fix the things that I talked about on this show today. I'm James Gailliard. This is the James Gailliard Show. I'm out of clock, but I'm not out of content. I'm out of talk. I'm out of time, but I'm not out of talk. I'll be back next Monday at 5 p.m. right here on Choice 92.1 FM. Go ahead and comment to your survey of the day. I'm going to read your questions. I'd love to know what you want me to talk about next week on the James Gailliard Show. I'm out.
The James Gailliard Show on Choice FM.